Look at this 1920s forged hammer, its steel head scarred from decades of relentless blows, still ready to drive a spike through iron as if it were butter. Now glance at a modern hardware store hammer plastic-coated, lightweight, and already splintering at the handle after a few months of work. How did we go from tools that outlived their owners to disposable junk that barely survives a single project? Let's step back to a time when a hammer wasn't just a tool, it was a lifeline. In the early 20th century, the world was clawing its way out of economic despair and charging headlong into industrial expansion. The Great Depression loomed over families, and before that, the scars of the First World War still ached in the bones of nations. Railroads needed to stretch across continents. Factories had to churn out goods to rebuild shattered economies. And skyscrapers began to pierce the sky as symbols of defiance against hardship. Failure wasn't an option for the men swinging these hammers. Whether they were driving railroad ties or shaping steel girders, a broken tool could mean a lost day's wage, a stalled project, or worse, a life snuffed out on the job. Every strike of the hammer had to count, because there was no safety net, no second chance. Society demanded tools as unyielding as the workers themselves, built to endure the brutal pace of progress in a world that wouldn't wait. So, how did they make a simple hammer into something damn near indestructible? The secret lay in the craft of forging, a process as old as civilization, but perfected in the industrial age. They'd heat raw steel often, a straightforward carbon alloy to a glowing red, then pound it under immense pressure with mechanical presses or drop hammers weighing tons. This wasn't just shaping metal, it was aligning its very grain, knitting the internal structure into a dense, cohesive mass that could shrug off the shock of impact after impact. Then came the heat treatment, a careful dance of fire and quenching to balance hardness with toughness. Too hard, and the head would chip under stress. Too soft, and it'd deform. They got it just right, creating a striking face that could bite into steel without cracking, even after years of abuse. The handle, often carved from hickory, wasn't just a stick of wood, it was chosen for its natural spring, absorbing the jarring force of each blow so the user's hands didn't shatter under the vibration. Hickory's fibers flexed without snapping, and its grain held tight to the head with a fit so precise it felt like an extension of the arm. Every part of this tool was overbuilt with a safety factor that modern engineers would call wasteful. But back then it was survival. The weight of the head sometimes over 3 pounds carried raw inertia, turning each swing into a controlled explosion of force. You could feel the heat of the steel after a long day, smell the singed wood of the handle, and hear the ringing echo of metal on metal reverberating through the air. This was engineering with muscle, designed to dominate the material world, not to be coddled or replaced. But let's not romanticize it too much. The men who wielded these hammers paid a steep price for that durability. These weren't weekend warriors tinkering in a garage. They were laborers, blacksmiths, railroad workers, and construction crews working 12-hour shifts in conditions that would make today's safety inspectors recoil. Swinging a heavy forged hammer wasn't just hard work. It was a war against physics. The sheer mass of the tool strained muscles with every lift, grinding down shoulders and backs over years of repetition. In the heat of a forge shop or under the blazing sun on a railroad line, sweat poured, and heat exhaustion was a constant shadow. Miss, a swing, and you risked smashing a hand, or worse, amputations weren't uncommon when fatigue set in and focus slipped. The vibration that the hickory handle absorbed still crept up the arms, numbing nerves and leaving joints aching long after the workday ended. And in tight quarters or on high scaffolds, a dropped hammer wasn't just a mistake. It was a lethal projectile. These workers didn't have the luxury of ergonomic designs or padded grips. They gripped raw wood, often slick with sweat, and powered through because stopping meant starvation. Their blood and grit were as much a part of these tools as the steel itself. A human cost we've conveniently forgotten in our rush for convenience. Now, fast forward a century, and let's see how these old beasts held up against time. Many of these forged hammers are still out there, passed down through generations. Their heads worn but unyielding, ready for another day's work with little more than a new handle swapped in. Compare that to a modern hammer you'd pick up at a big box store, with its composite or plastic-wrapped handle and a head cast instead of forged. I've seen these new tools split apart after a single season of heavy use. The handle delaminating under stress or the head loosening because the material can't handle repeated shock. Modern manufacturing swapped out forging for cheaper casting methods and ditched hickory for synthetic materials or low-grade woods to shave off a few bucks. The result? Tools that prioritize profit over permanence, designed to fail so you'll buy another. We stopped building like the old-timers because planned obsolescence became the name of the game-wa make-a-hama that lasts a lifetime when you can sell 3 in a decade. And don't get me started on the safety excuse. It's theater, a way to justify cutting corners while pretending it's for our own good. So where are these old forged hammers now? Some sit in dusty toolboxes, still used by craftsmen who know their worth. Others rest in museums, relics of an era when durability wasn't negotiable. A few have been scrapped, melted down for pennies. A sad end for tools that built empires. But their legacy lingers as a quiet rebuke to our disposable age. Progress gave us convenience, but at what cost when we can't even trust a hammer to last a single job without cracking under the weight of its own inadequacy? As we've seen, the forged hammers of the early 20th century were more than just tools. They were symbols of an era that demanded resilience in the face of unrelenting hardship. Now, let's dig deeper into the human cost of wielding these iron giants. The blood and sweat poured into every swing, and the toll it took on the bodies and souls of those who built our world with their hands. Picture the men who gripped these hammers day after day, tough, weathered laborers who didn't have the luxury of choice. They were the backbone of industrial progress, working in grimy forges, sprawling railroad yards, and towering construction sites where the air was thick with dust and the roar of machinery never ceased. These weren't sanitized workplaces with safety briefings and protective gear. A blacksmith in a sweltering shop, hammering red-hot steel into submission, faced temperatures that could blister skin on contact. The heat radiating from the forge wasn't just uncomfortable. It sapped strength, leaving men dizzy and dehydrated, their vision swimming as they fought to keep their focus. A single lapse in concentration could mean a misplaced strike, sending a hammerhead crashing into flesh instead of metal, resulting in crushed fingers or shattered bones. Medical care was a distant dream for many. The best they could hope for was a quick bandage and a return to the line, because stopping work meant no pay, and no pay meant hunger for their families. On the railroads, the stakes were even higher. Workers drove spikes into ties, with sledgehammers weighing up to 10 pounds, each swing a test of endurance under the open sky. The relentless sun beat down in summer, while winter brought biting winds that numbed hands until they could barely grip the hickory. The sheer repetition of the motion lifting, swinging, striking ground down their bodies over time. Shoulders dislocated from the strain, backs bent from years of hunching under the weight, and knees buckled from the constant jarring impact. Every strike sent a shockwave up the arm, even with the best hickory handle, wearing down cartilage and leaving joints stiff and swollen by day's end. Some men developed permanent tremors in their hands, a cruel reminder of the vibrations they'd absorbed for decades. And the danger didn't end with fatigue. A mistimed blow could glance off a spike, sending deadly shrapnel flying, or worse, catch a coworker in the arc of the swing. There were no hard hats or safety barriers to shield them, just raw skill and luck standing between life and a crippling injury. Construction crews faced their own brutal challenges, especially those working on the early skyscrapers that defined the modern cities, high above the ground on narrow steel beams, with nothing but a thin rope or sheer grit to keep them from plummeting. They swung hammers to secure rivets and girders. The wind howled at those heights, threatening to yank the tool from their hands. And a dropped hammer didn't just mean a lost tool, it became a missile, capable of killing someone below. The physical strain was relentless. Gripping the heavy steel head while balancing on a precarious perch demanded superhuman focus. Muscles burned from the effort of holding steady against gravity, and the constant tension left their bodies knotted with pain. Falls weren't uncommon, and neither were accidents where a hammer slipped, smashing into a worker, a leg or hand. Survivors often bore scars both visible and hidden from the trauma of those near, their nerves frayed from the ever-present specter of death. Even in less dramatic settings, like small workshops or shipyards, the toll was just as real. Shipbuilders hammering iron plates into place dealt with confined spaces where a swing could ricochet off a bulkhead, turning the tool into a weapon against its user. The noise alone was punishing a constant clang that left ears ringing for hours after the shift ended, sometimes leading to permanent hearing loss. And across all these trades, the lack of modern comforts meant raw, unfiltered pain. There were no shock-absorbing gloves or padded grips to ease the burden. Hands blistered and calloused, often splitting open from the friction of wood against skin, and the sweat that soaked their palms made every grip a gamble. Infections from untreated cuts were a silent threat, turning a small wound into a life-altering disability. These men didn't complain, not because they were stoic heroes, but because they had no other choice. Their livelihoods, their families' survival, depended on pushing through the agony, on mastering tools that were as unforgiving as the world they lived in. It's worth pausing to consider the mental weight of this labor as well, the pressure to perform without error, knowing that a single mistake could cost a limb or a life. Wore on their minds as much as the work wore on their bodies. There was no room for distraction, no allowance for a bad day. They carried the burden of precision under conditions that would break most of us today, and they did it without the safety nets we take for granted. The camaraderie among workers offered some relief, shared jokes and grim humor in the face of it couldn't erase the underlying truth. Every swing of that forged hammer was a gamble with their well-being. We've lost sight of this sacrifice in our modern rush for efficiency and comfort. Today, we design tools with lightweight materials and ergonomic curves, prioritizing ease over endurance, but we've forgotten the raw determination that fueled the men who built with those old hammers. Their pain and perseverance are etched into the steel they shaped, a testament to a time when failure wasn't just inconvenient, was catastrophic. As we marvel at the durability of these tools, we must also remember the human cost behind them, a cost paid in sweat, blood, and broken bodies, a debt we can never fully repay. Let's turn our gaze to the test of time, where these old forged hammers reveal their true grit against the relentless march of decades. Many of these tools, crafted in the early 20th century, have endured through wars, economic upheavals, and the rise and fall of industries, their steel heads still bearing the scars of countless strikes, yet refusing to yield. I've seen hammers from the 1920s in the hands of modern craftsmen, the hickory handles replaced a dozen times over, but the forged heads still delivering blows with the same authority as they did on a railroad line a century ago. They've been dropped, buried in mud, left to rust in forgotten sheds, and still, with a bit of wire brushing and oil, they come back to life, ready to split stone or drive a nail as if the years meant nothing. This isn't just durability, it's defiance, a middle finger to the idea that anything should be built to break. Now, stack that up against the sad state of a modern hammer you might grab off the shelf at a chain store. I've watched these so-called tools fail in spectacular fashion handles made of cheap composite materials or flimsy softwood, splintering after a few weeks of real work, unable to absorb the shock of a solid hit. The heads, often cast rather than forged, develop hairline cracks under pressure. Or worse, they loosen from the handle because the fit was never meant to withstand serious abuse. I've seen one particular brand marketed as heavy-duty, snap at the neck during a demolition job, leaving the user with a useless stub of plastic-coated junk. The culprit here isn't just poor design. It's a deliberate choice to prioritize cost over quality. Modern manufacturers know that a handle molded from synthetic fibers or a head poured into a cheap mold saves them pennies on the production line, even if it means the tool ends up in a landfill before the year is out. It's a stark contrast to the old way, where every ounce of steel and every inch of wood was chosen with the expectation of a lifetime of service. So why did we abandon the methods that gave us tools as tough as the men who used them? The answer is as cynical as it gets: profit margins and planned obsolescence. After World War II, as mass production ramped up and consumer culture took hold, the focus shifted from building to last to building to sell. Companies realized they could make more money if you had to replace your hammer every few years rather than pass it down to your grandson. Forging steel is labor-intensive and costly, requiring skilled workers and time. Casting is faster, cheaper, and doesn't demand the same craftsmanship. even if the result is brittle and prone to failure. Hickory handles gave way to fiberglass or plastic because they're easier to mass-produce. Never mind that they transmit every vibration straight into your bones or crack under sustained impact. And let's not forget, the marketing spin modern tools are sold as lightweight and user-friendly, as if the weight of an old hammer wasn't the very thing that made it effective. Safety regulations play a role too, but often it's just a smokescreen, an excuse to cut corners while claiming it's for our protection. The reality is, we've traded resilience for disposability, betting on convenience over legacy, and we're left with tools that betray us when we need them most. It's not just about hammers, either. This shift mirrors a broader decline in how we build everything, from bridges to appliances. Look at the 2018 collapse of the pedestrian bridge in Miami, a structure touted as a marvel of modern engineering that failed under its own weight due to design flaws and rushed construction, killing 6 people. Compare that to the Brooklyn Bridge, completed in 1883, still standing strong after nearly 140 years of brutal New York weather and endless traffic, built with over-engineered stone and steel that laughs at time. We've lost the ethos of overbuilding for endurance because it doesn't fit the quarterly earnings report. Back then, a hammer or a bridge was a commitment to the future. Now, it's a product with an expiration date, engineered to fail just in time for the next model to hit the market. This disposability creeps into every corner of our lives. Think of the modern tractor, bricked by a software update because the manufacturer decided you don't really own what you paid for. They do. And they'll lock you out unless you shell out for their proprietary repairs. Contrast that with an old forged hammer, a tool that answers to no one but the hand that wields it. There's no firmware to glitch, no subscription fee to keep it swinging. It's a reminder of a time when ownership meant something tangible, not a license agreement buried in fine print. We stopped building this way because durability doesn't drive repeat sales. And in a world obsessed with the new and shiny, the old virtues of toughness and reliability are dismissed as quaint, outdated notions. The legacy of these forged hammers isn't just in their stubborn refusal to break. It's in what they tell us about ourselves. Many still exist, tucked away in barns or displayed on workshop walls, their dings and scratches a map of the labor they've seen. Some have been retired to museums, preserved as artifacts of a bygone era, while others continue to work, proving their worth in the hands of those who value substance over flash. But far too many have been discarded, melted down for scrap, their stories erased by a culture that doesn't look back. What does it say about us that we've traded tools built for generations for ones that crumble in our grasp? Progress is a double-edged sword, and while it's given us speed and ease, it's stripped away the raw, unapologetic strength of a world that knew how to build for forever. Let's stand at the crossroads of time and witness the final verdict on these old forged hammers, tools that have stared down a century of wear and still refuse to bow. Many of these relics from the early 1900s remain in active duty, their steel heads pockmarked from endless battles with iron and stone, yet still capable of splitting a railroad spike with a single, thunderous strike. I've held hammers from the 1920s, their weight a comforting heft, passed down through families of carpenters and smiths, with nothing more than a fresh hickory handle to keep them swinging. They've endured floods, fires, and the neglect of forgotten tool chests, only to be pulled back into service with a quick scrub of rust and a smear of grease. This isn't mere survival. It's a testament to an era when breaking wasn't in the vocabulary of the men who built them or the tools they crafted. Now, cast your eyes on the pathetic shelf life of a modern hammer, plucked from the aisle of a discount retailer. I've seen these flimsy imposters crumble under the lightest of test handles of cheap fiberglass or thinly veneered softwood snapping clean in half after a month of framing a house. The heads, churned out through hasty casting rather than meticulous forging, develop microfractures from the first serious impact, rendering them useless before the job is done. I recall a specific model, branded as professional grade, whose synthetic grip peeled away like cheap tape after a week of driving nails, leaving the user with a slippery, splintered mess that couldn't hold up to a child's playhouse project. This isn't an accident. It's the byproduct of a system that values shaving $1 off production over delivering a tool you can stake your livelihood on. Modern manufacturers opt for quick, low-cost processes because they know most buyers won't notice the difference until it's too late, until the handle splits mid-swing and the job grinds to a halt. So why did we turn our backs on the brutal, beautiful simplicity of the old ways? The answer is as cold as the steel these hammers once shaped: profit and the seductive lie of obsolescence. Post-World War II, as the world drowned in consumerism, industries pivoted from crafting heirlooms to pushing products with built-in expiration dates. Forging a hammerhead takes time, skill, and resources hours of heat and pressure to align the metal's grain for unbreakable strength. Casting, on the other hand, is a shortcut, a way to churn out thousands of units in a fraction of the time, even if they buckle under the first real test. Handles of hickory, once standard for their natural shock resistance, were swapped for plastic composites or inferior woods because they're pennies cheaper to source and don't require the craftsmanship to fit properly. The excuse often thrown around is innovation or safety, but it's a hollow justification. Modern materials aren't safer if they fail when you need them most. We've been sold on the idea that lighter and cheaper equals better, ignoring that the weight of an old hammer was its power, not its burden. The real driver is repeat business. A tool that lasts a lifetime doesn't line corporate pockets the way a disposable one does, coaxing you back to the store every few years. This betrayal of durability isn't confined to hammers, it's a rot that's spread through everything we build. Take the 2007 collapse of the I-35W bridge in Minneapolis, a modern structure that gave way under rush hour traffic, claiming 13 lives due to under-engineered gusset plates and neglected maintenance. Then look at the fourth bridge in Scotland, completed in 18, a towering lattice of riveted steel that's withstood over a century of punishing winds and saltwater corrosion, still carrying trains today because it was built with a safety margin modern accountants would scoff at. We've abandoned over-engineering for the bare minimum, slashing costs to boost short-term gains, while forgetting that infrastructure and tools should outlast the hands that made them. The old hammers embody a philosophy we've discarded: build it once, build it right, and let it stand as a monument to human will. This disposable mindset poisons even our most vital machines. Consider today's farm equipment, like a John Deere tractor, rendered a useless hulk by a locked-out software update unless you pay the manufacturer's ransom for a fix. Contrast that with an old forged hammer. There's no digital gatekeeper, no paywall to keep it swinging. It's yours, truly yours, responding only to the strength of your arm and the sharpness of your intent. We've lost that autonomy in our quest for efficiency, handing control to corporations who profit from our dependence, while the simplicity of raw, unadulterated engineering gathers dust. The shift away from enduring design isn't progress. It's a calculated regression, a world where nothing is meant to last because permanence doesn't fuel the endless cycle of consumption. What remains of these forged hammers today tells a story of both triumph and tragedy. Some still labor in the hands of artisans who recognize their unmatched grit, their steel singing with every strike as if the decades were a mere blink. Others sit in quiet reverence in museums, displayed as curios of a tougher age, their worn handles and dented heads whispering of the sweat and struggle they've seen. Too many, though, had been cast aside, melted down for scrap metal, their value reduced 2 cents per pound in a society that can't see past the next quarterly report. What does this say about us? That we've traded the ironclad reliability of the past for a present or even a hammer can't be trusted to hold together? Progress has given us speed and gloss, but it's robbed us of the stubborn, unyielding soul of a time when tools and the people who wielded them were forged to endure, no matter the cost.